There is a book mentioned twice in the Bible itself, a book that God commanded to be recorded, but which simply disappeared from the face of the earth. And what is written in it completely changes everything you learned about the beginning of humanity. Because this book doesn't just talk about men, it talks about the giants who walked among us. And the question no one wants to ask is, why did this book disappear? Who was afraid of what was written there? And more importantly, what exactly does it reveal about the origin of these beings who terrorized the earth before the flood? Stay until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover may shake everything you believed you knew. Imagine for a moment that you're reading the Bible, that sacred book that billions of people consider the final word of God, and suddenly, right in the middle of the text, you find a reference, a citation. The Bible is telling you, this is written elsewhere. Go check the Book of Jasher. You stop, read it again, and think, Book of Jasher. What book is that? This happens in Joshua chapter 10, verse 13. The passage speaks of one of the most extraordinary moments in biblical history, the day the sun stood still in the sky. Joshua was in full battle against 5 Canaanite kings, and he called out to God for the sun to stop, and the sun obeyed. It stood still for almost a full day. And then, right after narrating this, the biblical text says something disturbing. Is this not written in the Book of Jasher? The Bible is confirming that another record exists, another book. A book that contains more details, more stories, more revelations. And this happens again in 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 18. David had just received news of the death of Saul and Jonathan, and he writes a poetic and painful lament. And the text says, "Behold, it is written in the Book of Jasher," twice. The Bible itself mentions this book. Twice it validates its existence, twice it tells you there's more information there. But when you search, when you go looking, you find nothing. The Book of Jasher is not in the Bible, it's not on church shelves. It's not in the sacred canons. It simply disappeared. And you know what's more disturbing? This book wasn't an obscure footnote. It was one of the most important historical records of the ancient Hebrews. A book that documented the deeds of the righteous ancient wars, the events that shaped the very origin of Israel. But at some point in history, it was removed, lost, or worse, hidden. The question that lingers in the air, whispering like a ghost in humanity's collective memory, is why? Now, before you think this book was completely lost in the sands of time, that it turned to dust along with ancient scrolls, I need to tell you something. There are copies, versions, translations that survived, and what is written in them is absolutely disturbing. There are at least 2 known versions of the Book of Jasher that have survived to this day. The most famous was published in 1751 in London and later republished in 1840 in the United States. Scholars have debated for centuries whether these versions are authentic or whether they are medieval reconstructions based on ancient fragments. But one thing is certain. Their content aligns frighteningly with biblical passages and fills in gaps that the Bible left open. And these gaps, they talk about giants. You see, the Bible mentions the giants briefly, too quickly, almost as if it wanted to gloss over this subject. Genesis 6 says that there were giants on the earth in those days, and that they were the Nephilim, sons of God, with the daughters of men. And that's it. The story continues. The flood comes, and the giants are washed from the face of the earth. But the Book of Jasher, it's in no hurry. It's not afraid to detail. It tells the complete story. And this story begins before the flood, in a time when the earth was not only inhabited by men, but by beings that should not exist. The Book of Jasher describes a world you would not recognize, a world where the line between the divine and human had been crossed, where fallen angels, rebellious celestial beings, descended to earth and took for themselves the women they desired. And from these forbidden unions were born hybrid creatures, beings of colossal stature, overwhelming strength, insatiable appetite, the Nephilim. Jasher describes these giants not as distant myths, but as real, physical, terrifying presences. They weren't just tall, they were predators. The book speaks of giants who consumed everything around them, who devoured the earth's resources, who oppressed men, who spread violence like a plague. And here's the part that freezes the blood. These giants weren't just brute creatures. They were intelligent, organized, they built cities, developed weapons, created systems of war. The Book of Jasher mentions that they taught men sorceries, black magic, and knowledge that should not have been revealed. They corrupted creation. And God looked at that and said, "Enough." The flood was not just a punishment for human wickedness, it was an act of extermination, a cosmic cleansing, an attempt to erase from the earth that which should never have existed. And the Book of Jasher makes this crystal clear. The giants were the central reason for the flood. They were the infection, and the water was the remedy. But here's the detail that the Bible doesn't tell you so clearly, and that Jasher reveals without mercy. Not all the giants died. Have you ever stopped to think about this? If the flood killed all the giants, how do they appear again later? How is it that when the Israelites enter the Promised Land, centuries after Noah, they find giants again? Og, king of Bashan, a giant whose bed measured more than 4 meters in length, Goliath of Gath, almost 3 meters tall, wearing armor that no man could carry, the Anakim, the Rephaim, the Emim, entire tribes of giants scattered throughout Canaan. How? The Book of Jasher suggests something that theologians avoid discussing. The lineage of the giants was not completely destroyed. Some survived, perhaps through Canaan, son of Ham, grandson of Noah, perhaps through some genetic corruption that remained latent, or perhaps the fallen angels returned to do what they did before. Jasher speaks of post-flood wars where the giants resurface. He describes bloody battles between Noah's descendants and these monstrous creatures. He mentions that the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, did not live in a world of pastoral peace. They lived in a world still infested by these beings. Abraham, according to Jasher, faced giants. He led men in battle against them and won. But winning didn't mean they had disappeared. It only meant they had retreated, waiting, growing in number again. And when Moses sends the 12 spies to explore Canaan, what do they find? Giants. And they return terrified, saying, "We are like grasshoppers before them." The Book of Jasher fills in the blanks. It tells you that the Promised Land was not empty. It was occupied by direct descendants of the Nephilim, by tribes that worshipped false gods, practiced human sacrifices, and were led by giants. And God commanded Israel to destroy them completely, without mercy, men, women, children, everything. Has this never made sense to you? Always seemed too cruel, disproportionate? But if you understand that they weren't just enemy tribes, if you understand that they were corrupted lineages, descendants of a forbidden genetic mixture created to destroy the messianic lineage, then God's command gains a totally different context. It wasn't genocide, it was surgery. It was the removal of a cancer that, if left alive, would destroy the very possibility of salvation for humanity. But the giants are not the only thing the Book of Jasher reveals. It also documents events that the Bible mentions briefly or doesn't mention at all. For example, did you know that, according to Jasher, Nimrod, the mighty hunter, builder of the Tower of Babel, was a tyrant who persecuted Abraham? That he tried to kill Abraham when he was just a child because Nimrod's astrologers predicted that a boy would be born and would destroy the kingdom's idols. Jasher tells that Abraham's father, Terah, was an idol maker, and that one day young Abraham destroyed all the idols in the shop, leaving only one, and placed an axe in its hand. When Terah asked what had happened, Abraham said, "The big idol destroyed all the others." And Terah shouted, "Idols don't do anything. They have no life." And Abraham responded, "Then why do you worship them?" This story is not in the Bible, but it's in Jasher, and it completely shapes the narrative of who Abraham was. Jasher also speaks about Joseph in Egypt in much more detail. He describes the temptations Joseph faced, the traps that Potiphar and his wife created. He speaks of Joseph not just as a virtuous slave, but as a man who fought, who suffered, who was tested to the limit, and who chose God even when everything was against him. And there's more. Jasher details the plagues of Egypt, Pharaoh's magicians, the internal conspiracies, the rebellions. He paints a much more vivid, much more human, much more real picture than the summaries we find in Exodus. It's as if the Bible were the trailer and Jasher were the complete film. But then the question returns: if this book contains so much valuable information, so much historical truth, so much spiritual revelation, why was it removed? No one knows for certain, but there are theories, and they all point in the same direction: control. When religious leaders began to define the biblical canon, deciding which books were inspired by God and which were not, they had criteria, and one of the criteria was, is this book aligned with the doctrine we want to teach? The Book of Jasher was problematic. It talked too much about giants, about fallen angels, about an active, tangible, dangerous spiritual world, about cosmic wars that had not yet ended. It placed too much emphasis on the supernatural, and this made people restless, because when you understand that giants really existed, that angels really rebelled, that there are forces beyond the veil that still operate in this world, you start to ask questions, dangerous questions, questions that threaten power structures. So the book was left out, not because it was false, but because it was inconvenient, and over the centuries it was forgotten, or rather, it was made to be forgotten. But truth is stubborn. It always finds a way to resurface. And today, with the internet, with modern research, with access to ancient manuscripts, the Book of Jasher is being rediscovered. And people are starting to ask again, what else have they hidden from us? Perhaps you're thinking, okay, this is fascinating, but what does this have to do with me? Why should I care about an ancient book about giants? Because it's not just about giants, it's about truth. It's about understanding that the story we've been told is incomplete, that there are layers, depths, realities that were deliberately hidden. And if they hid this, what else did they hide? The Bible itself says, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." But you cannot know the truth if parts of it have been erased. The Book of Jasher does not replace the Bible, but it complements it. It illuminates, it answers questions you didn't even know you had. And it reminds you of something crucial. The spiritual world is real. The battle between good and evil is real, and this battle has not ended. The giants may have died, but what they represented, the rebellion against God, the corruption of creation, the attempt to destroy the divine plan, that is still alive. And you are in the middle of this war. So what do you do with this information? You can ignore it. You can close this video and move on as if nothing had changed. You can continue believing the summarized, edited, safe version of the story. Or you can go deeper. You can search, research, read the Book of Jasher for yourself. Compare it with the Bible. Pray. Ask for discernment and discover that the God you serve is much greater, much more powerful, much more involved in human history than you ever imagined. Because in the end, this is not a story about giants. It's a story about you, about the choice you make between truth and illusion, between the courage to question and the comfort of accepting, between knowing God superficially or knowing Him in the depth. Of His war, of His justice, of His fierce love for those He created. The giants fell, but the question that remains is, will you remain standing? If this video touched you, if something inside you moved, if you felt you needed to hear this today, leave a comment. Tell me, do you believe the Book of Jasher is authentic? Do you think there are other truths being hidden? And if you want to continue this journey, If you want to discover more secrets buried in the pages of history, subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications, because there's much more coming, but only if you have the courage to face the truth. Until the next video, and may God protect you in this invisible battle that you now know exists.